Forget persuasion. Forget debate. True influence isn't about what you say, but the unshakable reality you embody. This is the art of silent mastery, a game played not with words, but with presence. It's about projecting a will so resolved, a character so defined, that the world bends to your gravity without a single uttered command. Learn to wield this quiet power, and you will move people long before you ever speak. We are taught that power lies in eloquence, in winning arguments and controlling the narrative. This is a slave's belief, a plea for validation from the herd. Real power is antecedent to language. It is rooted in the sovereign self. It is the power of the mountain that needs no introduction, of the predator whose calm stillness commands the field. This script is a guide to forging that inner citadel, making your mere existence a compelling argument. The common man mistakes noise for power. He believes that the volume of his argument, the cleverness of his retort, or the fervor of his plea is what bends the world to his desire. This is the fundamental error of the weak, the desperate chatter of those who have not yet conquered the wilderness within themselves. They are beggars at the banquet of power, holding out their empty bowls of rhetoric, hoping to be filled with the validation of others. Theirs is a poverty of spirit, a deep-seated conviction that their own reality is insufficient and must be sanctioned by the outside world. This perpetual negotiation is the mark of a soul that has not yet learned to command. True power, the kind that moves mountains and men without a sound, operates on an entirely different principle. It is not about convincing the world of your value. It is about embodying a value so undeniable that the world must either rise to meet it or be left behind. This is the state of being a manifested will. It is the transformation of internal resolution into external reality, a process that bypasses the feeble marketplace of words and operates on the level of instinct and presence. To become a manifested will requires, first, a ruthless excavation of the self. You must descend into the chaos of your own drives, your fears, your buried desires and aversions. Most people live as a committee of conflicting impulses, a cacophony of inherited morals and social expectations. One moment they wish for dominance, the next they cower for acceptance. This internal civil war is visible to all. It leaks out in hesitant gestures, apologetic eyes, and a constant need for reassurance. The sovereign individual ends this war not through compromise, but through a decisive victory. He scrutinizes every value, every desire, and forges them in the fire of his own judgment. What emerges is not a peaceful democracy of the soul, but a hierarchy, a single, dominant drive. His will becomes the unchallenged commander of his entire being. This internal order is the prerequisite for silent power. When your every atom is aligned toward a singular, self-chosen end, you cease to be a collection of reactions and become a unified force. Your very presence carries the weight of this inner resolution. This weight is felt physically. The body is not merely a vessel for the will, it is its primary instrument of proclamation. A begging voice is accompanied by a begging body, slumped shoulders that ask for pity, fidgeting hands that betray anxiety, a gaze that darts around seeking approval. The manifested will, in contrast, sculpts the body into its monument. Posture becomes a declaration of sovereignty. An upright spine is not merely anatomical. It is the physical manifestation of an unburdened spirit, one that carries its own weight and asks for no support. The gait is deliberate, each step a quiet affirmation of direction and purpose, not a hesitant shuffle into the future. The hands are still, not because they have nothing to do, but because they are reservoirs of potential energy, their repose more intimidating than another's frantic activity. The eyes hold their object with a steady, patient intensity. They do not grab or plead. They simply absorb and assess, communicating a deep, unshakable engagement with the world on their own terms. This physical grammar speaks a language older and more persuasive than words. It communicates to the ancient, reptilian parts of the brain in others, triggering instincts of respect, caution, or submission. Before you have stated your case, your body has already presented its verdict. In every interaction, the manifested will operate from a position of unassailable self-possession. Consider a negotiation. The common man enters with a list of talking points, prepared to debate, to concede, to barter. He is engaged in a verbal battle where his reality is up for discussion. The sovereign individual enters the same room, but his reality is not on the table. His terms are not a starting point for debate. They are the conclusion of a long, internal process. He does not explain why he deserves more. His very demeanor communicates that he is more. His silence is not empty, but full. It is a silence that contains the echoes of his past victories and the certainty of his future ones. When he does speak, his words are sparse and factual, serving merely to formalize a decision that his presence has already communicated. The other party, disarmed by the lack of anything to argue against, finds themselves agreeing to terms they might otherwise have contested. They have not been out, argued. They have been out, lived. They have encountered a density of being that makes their own reality feel flimsy and provisional. This principle extends to leadership and influence. The charismatic leader who shouts and gesticulates must constantly recharge his authority through performance. His power is external, dependent on the reaction of his audience. When the crowd disperses, his power diminishes. The leader who is a manifested need not perform. His authority is a settled fact, as undeniable as the law of gravity. He does not need to demand respect. His crew, his soldiers, his followers, absorb it from his calm assurance and unwavering focus. They are not following a person, but an embodied principle of order and purpose. In the face of chaos, his stillness becomes the epicenter around which reality reorganizes itself. He does not beg for order. He imposes it through the sheer force of his composed being. His will has become an environmental fact, a new rule of nature that those around him must adapt to. To stand in his presence is to feel the pull of this gravity, to be drawn into the orbit of a purpose greater than your own fleeting desires. This is the ultimate silent command, to create a world where your will is the sun, and the actions of others are the planets, moving in a silent, harmonious dance dictated not by plea, but by the irresistible logic of your own manifested existence. The ultimate error of the unformed individual is to believe that influence is a force projected outward, an invasive energy that must be thrust upon the world to bend it to one's design. This is the logic of the conqueror who understands territory, but not spirit, a crude and exhausting endeavor that creates subjects, not disciples. It is the method of those who feel their own inner emptiness so acutely that they must constantly fill it with the acknowledgement of others, a hunger that can never be sated. The higher path, the path of silent mastery, is not one of projection, but of cultivation. It is the art of becoming so dense with purpose, so aligned with a self-created reality, that you generate your own gravitational field. This is not about entering the space of others. It is about commanding the space you occupy so completely that others cannot help but enter it, feeling its pull as a fundamental law of their new environment. atmosphere is the sum total of your values, your discipline, your unspoken assumptions, and the unwavering standards you hold for yourself. It is the psychic and emotional ecosystem you build around you, and to master its gravity is to make your inner world the most compelling reality in the room. This mastery begins with the deliberate construction of an inner chaos forged into order. Most people fear the chaos within, the tumult of conflicting desires, the dark whispers of ambition, the raw, ungovernable passions that civilization demands they suppress. They spend their lives building flimsy walls against this storm, pretending it does not exist, and thus remain forever haunted by it. Their atmosphere is one of fragility and suppression, a thin veneer of civility over a seething void. The sovereign individual does not suppress this chaos, he welcomes it as the raw material of his greatness. He descends into the labyrinth of his own psyche, not as a victim, but as a conqueror and an artist. He stares into the abyss of his potential for both creation and destruction, and does not flinch. He engages in a relentless internal alchemy, where the base metals of envy, rage, lust, and pride are subjected to the immense pressure of his will and the fiery discipline of his intellect. Through this violent, private process, the chaos is not silenced, it is organized. The random noise of impulse becomes the directed energy of purpose. The conflicting drives are forged into a single, terrible engine of ambition. This internal transformation is not quiet. It is a roaring furnace, but its product is a profound and unshakable inner order. This inner order radiates outward, crystallizing as your atmosphere. It is communicated through an economy of action that speaks volumes. Where the common man fills silence with nervous chatter, you let silence stand as a judgment. Your pauses are not empty. They are heavy with unspoken thought, and others will rush to fill them, often revealing their weaknesses in the process. Your refusal to react immediately to provocation is not passive. It is a demonstration that your emotional state is not a puppet to be jerked by the strings of others. You control the tempo of interactions, not by demanding silence, but by possessing a natural rhythm that is slow, deliberate, and unconcerned with the frantic pace of the herd. Your personal environment, your home, your workspace, becomes a physical manifestation of this inner order. It is not merely tidy, but curated. Every object, its placement, its quality, speaks of a mind that has made conscious choices, that rejects clutter and mediocrity on a fundamental level. This curated space is an extension of your will, a territory where your values are made physical, and anyone who enters it is immediately subject to its rules. They feel the implicit demand to rise to its standard, to quiet their own chaos in the presence of your order. The power of this gravitational pull lies in its ability to make alignment feel like discovery. The weak leader demands obedience. He must constantly enforce his rules, punish transgressions, and remind others of his authority. This creates followers of circumstance, not of conviction. Their loyalty is to their own safety, not to his vision. But when you have mastered your atmosphere, you do not need to demand agreement. Your reality is so complete, your conviction so palpable, that others are drawn into its logic. They begin to see the world through the lens of your values, not because you have argued them into it, but because your lens offers a clarity and a strength their own perspective lacks. Your certainty becomes a refuge for their uncertainty. In your presence, their own compromises and self-deceptions become painfully clear to them, and the path to a more resolved existence. Your path becomes irresistibly attractive. They will adopt your mannerisms, repeat your phrases, as if they were their own original thoughts, and defend your perspective with a passion they rarely muster for their own. This is the highest form of influence, to become the silent architect of another's will. You have not commanded them. You have provided a gravitational center so strong that their own orbit naturally shifts to revolve around you. They believe they are acting on their own free will, making their own discoveries, when in truth, they are moving according to the physics of a reality you have engineered. This gravitational mastery redefines every form of engagement. In a conflict, you do not meet the other on their battlefield of raised voices and petty accusations. You allow their energy to dissipate into the vast, absorbent space of your composure. Their anger, their demands, their attempts to draw you into an emotional brawl simply collapse under their own weight, finding no reciprocal force to sustain them. You have not defeated them. You have made their method of engagement irrelevant. In persuasion, you do not list points of logic. You simply state your position as if it were a foregone conclusion, an undeniable fact of the universe, and then return to your silent certainty. The other person is left to bridge the cognitive gap between their doubt and your certainty, and in that internal struggle, they often convince themselves. You have not sold them an idea. You have allowed them to buy into your atmosphere. To master your own gravity is to understand that the most powerful forces are not those that shout, but those that pull. It is to become a sun around which others inevitably revolve, not because you have captured them, but because the darkness of their own indecision makes your light the only sensible path forward. Your presence becomes a quiet, unyielding edit on the reality of others, and forcing them to either elevate themselves to meet your standard or to acknowledge their own weakness by retreating from your field of influence. This journey into silent power is not a technique, but a transformation. It is the arduous cultivation of an inner sovereignty so complete that it becomes your only language. You cease to beg for recognition and instead become a living decree. You stop invading the worlds of others and instead generate a gravity of such compelling order that they are drawn into your orbit. This is the final outsmarting to move the world not by force of argument, but by the unshakable force of your being. Your will, manifested through disciplined action and unwavering presence, becomes an unanswerable command. In the economy of true power, the most profound victories are won not in the clash of words, but in the silent, absolute authority of a self-mastered soul.